we see a few possible rays of sunshine here in U.S. China trade talks, and I wonder if there's also a silver lining too among that attack on the oil facility that we saw in Saudi Arabia. If we're looking for any positives, maybe there's a sign of a breakthrough there. Maybe China would end tariffs on U.S. oil.
Well, it's true that the attack on the Saudi oil fields is going to raise oil prices, both for China and for the United States, and that's going to add more stress to both the Chinese economy and the U.S. economy. Both countries, when I talk to my friends in China, they tell me they want a deal, American friends and Chinese friends, but of course, it all comes down very much to saving face. Each side has to save face. But the little adjustments by both China and the U.S., exemptions and give or take here and there, I think indicate that both sides are looking for a way to get at least an interim deal. Both are trying to find a way to at least save face to keep going forward. The Chinese, though, would like two tracks. They want to separate the trade from the national security difficulties. Frankly, I think that's a good idea. It tends to lower the temperature. The more U.S. and China talk about trade only, not bring in Huawei, ZTE, and other issues like that. So we'll see. Both sides like a deal, but as we know, whenever there's some kind of a deal, we don't know how long it's going to last. President Trump sometimes changes his mind. Chinese like consistency. They want something that's solved, and if they reach a deal, they're going to try to find some way to keep President Trump's feet to the fire so he doesn't change his mind, or at least less likely to change his mind.
Okay, well, if we do get something incremental, which seems to be the best-case scenario for the talks next month, then what looks like being the easiest thing to achieve here that both sides can agree to?
I think so. I think that's how it's looking. We're all holding our breath, hoping that that's what happens. Even if it's interim, it's better than nothing. And I think it's more likely to occur the more the economies on both sides of the Pacific start to sour. My friends in China, my American friends in China, are more pessimistic about the Chinese economy, although on the other hand, the rising consumer growth in China keeps America's business in China, and I think that's helpful.
Ambassador, but the flip side of that argument is that we are still going to continue to see these issues between the U.S. and China if you only agree to a limited deal, including these issues over IP theft, not to mention state subsidies coming that China has that the U.S. considers to be unfair. So when can we get those resolved if we just go for a limited deal?
Well, that's one of the key questions, clearly. And again, my American friends tell me they're still quite concerned about IP theft and subsidies. But add to that, we have elections coming up in the United States, and it's going to be both parties are going to be tempted to be quite critical of China. Democratic presidential candidates are not going to be soft on China, that's for sure. And President Trump's not going to be soft on China. Now, having said that, I think that the markets realize that some of this is just political. And that's going to be baked into, I think, some of the market's reaction to the politics in Washington. Now, having said that, still, it's going to be difficult, even if we get an interim deal, difficult to maintain it, sustain it through the next couple of years. And most businessmen I talk to are quite wary about that. Maybe there'll be an interim deal, but how long will it be sustained?
But if you are going to have to resolve these issues eventually, does it make sense to put pressure on China when they're already dealing with a slowing economy? We saw the August numbers when it comes to their economy really not looking great, not to mention that they have issues in Hong Kong with the protests as well. So if you have a stronger U.S. economy, isn't this the time to get to a deal that could benefit Washington?
Well, that's the argument, but I think one should take that argument with a few grains of salt. You sure saw President Xi's exhortation to the party faithful 4 or 5 days ago. He used the word struggle 60 times of addressing the party faithful, pointing out that China has a long struggle ahead. And China can eat better. It can suck it up. It can do what it has to do to survive a challenge by any country anywhere. So Sure, China's economy is weak, and sure, the United States economy is somewhat strong, but it's a little bit weak too. That's why President Trump spent so much time criticizing Chairman Powell, because Trump himself knows that maybe the economy in the U.S. is not quite as strong as he'd like it to be. So anyway, I do think, bottom line, it takes really a statesmanship on both sides, and support for neither side to call other side names, and let things cool down a little bit here, so it's more likely we can get a deal. A deal obviously helps the two biggest countries in the world, and it helps the world therefore.
Of course, we are getting into the U.S. electoral cycle now, Ambassador. Do you think the president would be more likely to seek a lasting deal before that election, or is it better for him to keep the Chinese as a scapegoat and try and do something after the poll?
Well, that depends upon the state of the American economy over the next 12 months. If the American economy is going south, I think President Trump's going to want to do a deal. And the deal will be roll back tariffs as much as possible, maybe get some kind of a agreement on structural issues. I don't think it'd be very strong. But if he gets a deal where tariffs are rolled back, the stock market is just going to shoot up. And that he thinks that's going to help him get reelected. On the other hand, if we're kind of bumbling along and the U.S. economy is not doing too badly, then I think you see Trump more likely to want a scapegoat rather than try to find a deal.
Yeah, so who does need a deal more right now? If you step back and look at it from, the 1,000-foot view, we have President Xi Jinping using rhetoric like "prepare yourselves for another long march." But is the U.S. consumer starting to look vulnerable? Who's got more at stake here?
Well, politically, it's the American farmers and ranchers who are really at the tipping point. They tend to be Republican. They're so far still sticking with the president. But if China does not buy enough soybeans, and farmers can't sell enough, or corn, or some wheat, that's politically going to be a big difference. The American consumer, they haven't hit too hard yet by the tariffs. But if the tariffs, the scheduled tariffs to go into effect in October, do go into effect, then I think consumers are going to start to feel a little bit of a pain. Apple, for example, is eating it. They're not passing on price increases to their consumer. Rather, they're just eating it. They're taking the cost increases that they're getting because of the trade war.
And Ambassador, just quickly, we had the White House now announcing an initial trade agreement with Japan. How helpful will this be in building a united coalition against China in Asia?
Well, I was very disappointed that we pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I thought it was a big mistake, a huge mistake. And I was happy to see Japan pick up the mantle and start to put together a regional Pacific Partnership agreement. The bilateral of Japan is helpful. Trump likes to do bilaterals. He thinks he has more leverage. I think that's inaccurate because the other country says, oh, no, their politics in their country, too. Most countries can do more to free up trade if there's a multilateral agreement, because then the pain is shared. So we'll see what's in the deal. I don't know what kind of a deal the United States and Japan agreed to.